Morning, everyone. Hope you are able to see the screen and you are able to hear my voice. Yes or no? All
Yes,
right.
sir.
Okay. So let's continue further from the last class. So we were basically talking about the CPU scheduling algorithms. Let me just run through from the beginning. So we were trying to see some of different algorithm. The previous class we had seen the first come first serve algorithm, and then we started with shortest job first, wherein the we approximate the burst time of every process. Whatever is the least, that's going to be picked up for the scheduling on priority. Okay, and we this is a non preemptive version that we have seen. So once we were done with it, we identified the preemptive model of that. We call it as shortest remaining time first. Some people also call it as preemptive SJF, but a better name could have been shortest remaining time first. So in this particular thing, depending on their arrival time, every point some new process comes into picture. We look at who is having the remaining time, what is the minimum among them. So if that is not the current process, then the current process is going to be preempted. That is in the sense the process will be removed from the execution state and it is put back into the ready queue. And the newly arrived process whose remaining time is less is going to be picked up and it is going to be assigned into the processor for the execution. So it's going to be shifted to execution state. So this process continues until all the process completes their execution. Right, so that was another. The last algorithm that we had seen in the last class is basically priority scheduling. So everything will come up with a priority. So there is again preemptive and non-preemptive version, but preemptive one makes much more sense over there. So what we try to do is every process is going to have a priority. Smaller the number means higher priority. So when a higher priority process comes, if at all a lower priority process is in execution, then the lower process is going to be preempted from the scheduler, from the CPU, and it's going to be added into a ready queue, and the processor is going to be assigned to the higher priority process. So this is what is the idea of priority scheduling. But the priority scheduling, as we saw, it is having a issue there. So what is the issue? It is called as starvation. If some process is having lower priority, and if continuously higher priority processes are going to be arrived, then what will happen? The lower priority processor will never get a chance to execute, or it will get a chance very late in late. So it need to wait for a longer period of time. So such problem is called as starvation over there. And we also proposed a solution for it. It is basically called as aging. So what is aging? As the time progress, the priority of a low priority process is going to be increased. So we have to compensate the waiting time of this particular low priority process. So that is the reason why we increase the priority after a say a fixed time duration. So we say after every 100 millisecond, its priority is going to be increased by one or something of that sort can be thought of. So because of this solution, what will happen? After a certain period of time, the priority of a low priority processor increases, and even if a higher priority process comes, it will still get a priority because its priority would have been much better than a high priority process over there. So in such cases, what will happen? The starvation problem will get over. Of course, it will still wait for a longer duration, but it is not like too long, or it is not like it will never get a chance to execute. So that kind of problem can be solved with this technique of aging over here.
So one question, sir.
Yeah.
So if there are n processes, sir, and aging takes place, then sir, if by chance two processes have the same priority, then how does the execution takes place?
Okay, so I was expecting this question from yesterday. It is not only with respect to this scheduling algorithm. In fact, this problem might come in all these scheduling algorithms, right? So, in fact, you have FCFS algorithm. If two processors are going to arrive at the same time, then how do you do it? How do you solve that particular thing? Or it could be with shortest job first. So let us say there is another process in this particular example, P5, whose burst time is also say 3 seconds, 3 milliseconds. So there is a tie. So what do you do then? It could be with yes, shortest remaining time first also. There is two processes whose remaining time is the same. So how do you solve it? And as it is pointed out in this particular example also. So let us say on a priority, if two processes are having the same priority, how do we solve it? Answer is very simple. So it's going to be followed in first come first serve order. Suppose in this particular case, let us say there is an arrival time also comes into picture, and let us say there are two processes. Say P6 is also having a priority 1. Then I'm going to check whether P2 came first or P6 came first. So whoever came first is going to get the priority and they are going to be scheduled first. Even if there is a tie in arrival as well, then ties are broken randomly. So one of them is going to be randomly picked up by the scheduler and the CPU is going to be assigned. So the next process will get an immediate next turn because its priority is same. Right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is about different algorithm that we have seen so far. Let us do one more algorithm which is called as round robin algorithm. So as the name itself says, we are going to give a chance for every process in a kind of musical chair. Say we fix a time quantum to which every process need to execute. Say it is 10 millisecond. Let us say there is five process P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. So what we do in case of round robin is P1 will execute for 10 millisecond. Then it is irrespective of whether it completed or not, it is going to be taken out and then it is given to P2. So P2 will execute for 10 seconds. Then it is given to P3 for next 10 seconds and further for P4 and next for P5. And once P5 is done, there are no other fresh process. So the cycle repeats. Again, it will start allocating from P1, P2, P3, P4, P5 and this cycle repeats until all of them completes their execution over there. So this is the idea of round robin. You just go around every process in a round robin fashion. That's the as the name itself indicates.
But
Now
sir,
each process,
some
yeah,
question. So using round robin process, sir, won't it like cause a huge delay in completion of a process if it keeps on going from one process to another?
correct. So round robin will definitely have not so good turnaround time, but it will have a better response time when compared to all the previous algorithm we say. So every process will start its execution at some point of time and then it will start giving you a response over there. So it has its own advantages as well as disadvantage. Okay, so now every process gets a small quantum of period, so that is what we call it as time quantum. Let us represent it with a variable called q. Typically it is between 10 to 100 millisecond as decided by the operating system implementation. So once a process has completed its time quantum, it is going to be pulled out from that particular execution state and added back to the ready queue. So the next one who is in the ready queue will get this particular thing, process over there, processor over there. So that's basically context switching is basically happening over there. So one process which is half executed is removed from the processor and all its variable memory everything is returned back to PCB, and the next processes PCB is from where you pull out all these information register content memories and so on. load it, and then it starts the execution for the indicated time quantum over there. So as you can understand from this, the round robin is going to increase the number of context switches that is required over there. So that's another overhead for the processor over there, right? But if there are n processors, and if we are trying to execute, give a time quantum of q, then no process will wait for more than n minus 1 times q time units. So the average waiting time will be, worst case waiting time of a particular process is n minus 1 times q, right? So in order to identify the time quantum, we had spoken about timer concept. So that's going to be implemented by the operating system. But the question is, how do we fix this q value, time quantum q value? If I fix q to be very large, then the behavior becomes exactly similar to first come first serve. Say I say q equal to, let us say, 1000 milliseconds, then all process will start its execution and they'll easily complete it. So it behaves exactly like a first in first out manner. But if the queue is very small, then there will be lot of context switches, which is again a overhead on the processor where we don't do anything effectively. So the system performance will degrade. So keeping this in mind, the queue value need to be fixed over there. Let's take up an example. Let us say there are three processor P1, P2, P3 whose burst times are, say, 24, 3 and 3 respectively. And the assumption here is all three processors have arrived at time 0. So at time 0 itself all three are available to us, and we are going to schedule them using the round robin algorithm, and we are going to keep a time quantum of 4 milliseconds. Okay, so we have just taken some random number, try to do this. Time quantum is basically 4 milliseconds. So then what will happen when we write the Gantt chart? So between 0 to 4, now this is going to be done in round robin fashion. There is no priority that is involved. So between 0 to 4 minutes, P1 is going to execute. And between 4 to 8 milliseconds, P2 is supposed to execute. But you see, P2's required burst time is just 3 milliseconds. Our time quantum is basically 4. It doesn't make any sense for me to allocate the entire 4 milliseconds of quantum to processor P2, wherein it can complete the job by 3 milliseconds itself. So I am not ready to waste that 1 millisecond, right? So what we'll try to do is we will allocate the time quantum of 4 millisecond, but at 3 millisecond itself processor P2 will complete and it will terminate. So immediately the next processor is going to be pulled in and it is going to be assigned that particular task. So effectively P2 will use only 3 milliseconds of the quantum over there. So because of that, when we write this particular Gantt chart, so between 0 to 4 millisecond, P1 processor will execute and its burst time will now reduce to 20. And between 4 to 7, P2 will execute, whose burst time will reduce to 0. That means it has completed. And the same thing will happen with P3. So between 7 to 10, that 3 millisecond, again this particular P3 will complete its execution and it will also terminate. Next, what happens? There is only P1 with which the round robin will work. So between 10 to 14, P1 will continue. 14 to 18, P2 will continue. 18 to 22, P2 will continue. 22 to 26, P1 will continue. And lastly, from 26 to 30, P1 will continue. So if you look at the total burst time, so it is 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4. It becomes 24 milliseconds over there. So this is how the round robin algorithm will work, with our assumption that the time quantum is basically 4 milliseconds in this particular case. Now you try to figure out what is the average waiting time of every processor and what is the average turnaround time of every processor. Let us try to calculate the waiting time of every processor. So waiting processor time for process P1 is basically how much? Can somebody tell me the answer? waiting time of process P1. Anybody? Okay, it's 6 millisecond. Okay, I'll minimize like this. So processor P1 will be waiting when P2 and P3 is executing. So it is 3 plus 3, 6 milliseconds. You are right. What about waiting time of process P2? P2 is only waiting at this particular slot and then it executes. So waiting time of P2 is 4 seconds, 4 millisecond, and waiting time of P3. So what is the waiting time of P3? Anyone? Waiting time of P3? It is 4 plus 3, 7 seconds. That's the waiting time of P3, correct? So the total waiting time becomes 17 milliseconds. So divided by 3, that gets you 5.67 milliseconds as the average waiting time in this particular case. Let us look at turnaround time of this particular scheduling. So what will happen? Turnaround time of P1. You know that P1 completes at 30 milliseconds. So turnaround time includes waiting time plus execution time. So I'll only look at what is the completion time of P1. It is 30 millisecond. I know that all of them arrived at time 0. So its turnaround time is 30 milliseconds. Anyone had questions? What about turnaround time of P2? P2 completed at 7 millisecond and it also arrived at 0th millisecond. So turnaround time of P2 is 7 milliseconds and that of P3 is basically it completed execution at 10 millisecond and arrived at 0th millisecond. So it is also 10 in this particular case. So our total turnaround time is 30 plus 10 plus 7. So that is basically 47 milliseconds. And if I divide it by 3, I get an average turnaround time as 15.67 milliseconds. Okay. So there is a general observation, not on a specific problem, that if you compare the average turnaround time of round robin with that of the shortest job first, then SJF is basically better. But if you look at the response time for every process, if you remember what is the response time, the first place wherein it gets its response, right? Since every process is going to get a time quantum, it is going to be much lesser when compared to SJF or any other algorithm. So everybody starts, its execution at least partially when it gets its time quantum. So the average response time is going to be better in case of round robin fashion. Okay, let us do one thing. So in this particular case, the time quantum was 4 milliseconds. So instead of that, let us say if I take time quantum as 2 milliseconds, then what will happen? All other data remains the same. Only thing is this particular time quantum is reduced to 2 milliseconds. Can you try to write a Gantt chart by yourself? Try to write a Gantt chart. Then as usual, you'll start with P1, then it goes to P2, then it goes to P3, P2. Anurag, it is P2 because they all arrived at time 0 and now we just go it in the same order. So P1 will execute between 0 to 2, P2 will execute between 2 to 4, P3 will execute between 4 to 6. right? So once that is done, again P1 will get its processor between the time 6 to 8, and then P2 will get, but for how many duration? It is only between 8 to 9, because the total burst time of P2 is 3 milliseconds. We have already given 2 milliseconds there, so 1 more millisecond it is given. Again same thing with P3, that also required only 1 millisecond, so that's going to be allocated bit for P3. And then from 10 to 12, 10 to 12, 12 to 14, 14 to 16, 16 to 18, 18 to 20. All this belongs to process P1 continuously. So that means how much? So up to 24 units. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 we have done. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 two times, it's going to be 24. So it is 20 to 22, 22 to 24, 24 to 26, 26 to 28, and 28 to 30 now. Right? So this is how your Gantt chart will look like. Now you look at the waiting time of every process. What is the waiting time of P1, P2 and P3? So waiting time of process P1 is basically here 2 plus here 2 4 plus here 1 plus here 1. So it's basically 6. And waiting time of process P2 will increase, I believe, now. So that is here first 2 seconds, and here again to 4, again to 6, and yeah, that's it. So 6 milliseconds for P2 as well. As far as P3 is concerned, it is 2 plus 2 4, and then 6 plus 1 7 milliseconds. Was it the same values in the last problem? Where did I write that? So it was, yeah, 6, 4 and 7. Now it is 6, 6 and 7. So that makes it to, total makes it to 19 by 3 turns out to be 6.33 milliseconds as the average waiting time. So are you getting this, guys? Same answers, or you are getting some different answers? What I've done is waiting time of process P1. I did not understood why there is P2 again at 8th millisecond here. Okay, see, what is the burst time of P2, Anurag? Burst time of P2 is 3 milliseconds, right, as given in the question, not 2 millisecond. 2 millisecond is our quantum. Burst time is 3 millisecond. And when you gave an access here, so what you did, P2 executed for 2 milliseconds. So out of that required 3 millisecond, it completed 2 millisecond. That means something is left, right? So it has not done the entire quota. That's why we give that required 1 more millisecond here. So put together, now it has executed for 3 millisecond. This problem did not come in the earlier one because our time quantum was 4. Within that itself, P2 and P3 were able to complete. So they did not require any extra time over there. Arrival time is 0. All processes are arriving at time 0. I am only saying time quantum is 2. That means every process will execute only for 2 milliseconds. And for the same reason, P3, you see it executed for 2 seconds here, and once again it continued its execution for 1 more second here, 1 more millisecond. So put together it also continued for 3 milliseconds. Now based on this we calculated the waiting times. You see here P1 waited for this 4 seconds duration plus this 1 plus 1. So total waiting time of P1 is 6 millisecond. Yes, you are right. Maximum is 2 milliseconds. Correct. How about P2? It waited for these 2 millisecond plus these two plus these two. So totally 6 milliseconds it waited. What about P3? It waited for this 4 plus this 2, 6 plus this one, 7 milliseconds. So that's how I got these numbers, and you take the average of this, it turns out to be 6.33. So that becomes the average turnaround, average waiting time. On a similar fashion, let us do the turnaround time as well. So what is the turnaround time of P1? You see P1 completed at 30 millisecond and it arrived at 0. So turnaround time of P1 is 30. What about P2? So P2 completed its execution at 9th millisecond, arrived at 0th millisecond. So its turnaround time is also 9. And P3 completed at 10th millisecond, which also arrived at 0th millisecond. So turnaround time of P3 is 10 millisecond, and you take the average of it, it is basically 16.33 milliseconds in this particular example over there. I think earlier it was 15.67. By reducing the quantum, the turnaround time has actually increased in this particular example there. Any doubts to anybody? There is hardly anybody who is, oh, by mistake I pressed something. There is hardly anybody attending. Under that, hardly anybody is participating. So, I don't know how the learning is actually happening. Right, so let us just proceed and complete this before we take up some other problems. So one thing is effect of time quantum on context switching. See, let us consider a process which require 10 milliseconds. I'll just maximize it. Let us consider a process which require 10 milliseconds and consider a time quantum of 12 milliseconds. So what will happen? The entire 12 millisecond is allocated to this particular process P1. Out of that, it will use only 10 millisecond and it completes its execution. So is there any context switch that is happening at this particular point? No, right? So because it's able to complete everything within the time. So number of context switches in that particular case becomes 0. Let us say instead of time quantum being 12 millisecond, if I reduce it to 6 milliseconds, then what will happen? This process need to come twice. So first it is going to be loaded once. For 6 milliseconds it will execute, and its required millisecond will reduce it to 4, and next time when it gets that share of 4 millisecond and it will complete the execution. So that means one time it has to go out of the processor and again it need to come at a later point of time. So you require at least one time the context switching will happen in this particular case. In a similar note, if I reduce it to say 1 millisecond, then this process time, required processing time is 10. So 10 times it need to be loaded again. So that means at least 9 times the context switching need to happen. So you can see here, the larger the time quantum, the smaller is the number of context switches. That's exactly what we said. So if it is too large, then its performance becomes something like FIFO, just like what you can see in 12 cases. If it is too short, it requires too much of overhead in terms of context switchings, right? So that's about scheduling algorithm. Now let's take up one problem and try to solve it. So let us consider this one. We have some processes and their arrival time and their burst time. Everything specified in milliseconds. So let us try to do this. There is a processor P1, P2, P3, say P4 and P5, and let us say they arrived at time 0, 2, 3, 3 and 4 milliseconds, and let us say their burst time is say 5 milliseconds, then 6 milliseconds, and then 4 milliseconds and 2 milliseconds and 7 milliseconds. Right? So this is what I'm trying to show here. So let us try to do this shortest job first. We'll try to implement shortest job first, shortest remaining time first, round robin algorithm. Let us try to implement all three algorithms on this and calculate the waiting time, average waiting time and turnaround time. Okay, so let us start with shortest job first algorithm. So shortest job first, what will happen now? I expect you to solve this particular problem by yourself. Try to write a Gantt chart first. Time 0 when you arrived. Okay, let's be very specific. SJF being a non-preemptive version, we'll see. SJF is non-preemptive, let us say. So at time 0, only one process is there, that is P1, so it will start the execution, and since it is non-preemptive, so it's going to continue and execute up to 5 milliseconds there, and by then when it is 5 all processes have arrived. So next shortest job is P4, so we are going to take P4 and it will execute for another 2 milliseconds. 0 to 2 is P1. No, Anurag, we are talking about non-preemptive SJF. So that means at time 0 when you give the execution for P1, it will continue until it completes because it is non-preemptive. So when is it going to complete? It is going to complete at 5 milliseconds. So 0 to 5 P1 will execute, then 5 to 7 P4 will execute, and then the next shortest time is P3. So P3 will execute between 7 to 11, and then the next one is basically P2 which will execute between 11 to 17, and finally P5 between 17 to 24. That's how the Gantt chart will look like. P1 between 0 to 5, 5 to 7 is P4, then P3 between 7 to 11, then between 11 to 17 is P2, and lastly P5 between 17 to 24. Right, so this is how our Gantt chart will look like. P2 from 5 to 11. Why P2, Aishwarya? At time interval 5, you see all processes have come. Okay, we are talking about shortest job first. Since we are talking about shortest job first, which is the next shortest? I am done with P1 already. Next shortest is depending on the bus time. So it is 6, 4 to 7. Shortest is 2. That's why I pick 4 here. P4 here, not P2. I am not following FCFS algorithm. Clear, right? Okay. Now let's talk about waiting time and turnaround time for every process. WT is waiting time, TAT is turnaround time. Let us see P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5. So what is the waiting time of P1? It started its execution at time 0 and you see it arrived at also time 0. So waiting time of process P1 is 0. Waiting time of process P2, it is starting its execution at 11th millisecond and it came at 2nd millisecond. So in between 2 to 11, that is 9 millisecond it was waiting. So waiting time of P2 is 9. Preemptive one, okay. And P3, what is the waiting time of P3? P3 is basically at 7th millisecond it started and it arrived at 3 milliseconds. So between 3 to 7, the 4 minutes duration it was waiting. P4 its execution started at 5 and it came at 4th millisecond. So between 4 to 5, only 1 millisecond it waited. And P5 company started at 17 and it arrived at 4th millisecond. Sorry, I did a mistake, I believe. Yeah, P4 started its execution at 5 and it arrived at 3. So between 3 to 5 for 2 millisecond it was waiting. And P5 arrived at 4 and started its execution at 17. So 17 minus 4, it is 13 millisecond is the waiting time. And what about the average? You take the average of it. So it is 13 plus 2 plus 4 plus 9 plus 0 divided by 5. So it is 15, 19, 28. 28 by 5 is 5.8, I believe. Or 5.6, huh? Yeah, 5.6. Right. Let us look at the turnaround time. What is turnaround time of process P1? P1 completed its execution at 5 millisecond and it came at time 0. So that means its turnaround time is only 5 milliseconds. Turnaround time of P2 completed at execution at 17th millisecond and it came at 2 milliseconds. So the difference, that is 15 millisecond, is its turnaround time. That of P3 completed at 11. 11 minus its arrival time is being 3. So 11 minus 3, it is 8. And that of P4 completed its execution at 7 and it came at 3. So 7 minus 3, it's basically 4 milliseconds. And that of P5, it completed its execution at 24th millisecond and it came into picture only by 4 milliseconds. So 24 minus 4, 20 milliseconds. You look at the average, 5 plus 15 is 20, 20 plus 8, 28, 28 plus 4, 32, 32 plus 20, 52, 52 by 5, that turns out to be 10.4 millisecond is the turnaround time. So this is non-preemptive SJF algorithm. Next, let us go and do a preemptive SRTF, so that we are looking at both versions. SRTF preemptive model. So then what will happen? Just for our easy reference, I will copy this once again and paste it here so I don't have to go up and refer it every time. So in case of preemptive SRTF, we start with time 0, there is only 1, so there is no computation, so it will start with P1 itself. It will execute between 0 to 2 milliseconds. Okay. When it executes at 2 milliseconds, there is one more process that is basically joining. And you see here the remaining time of P1 has now come to is reduced by 2. So from 5 it is reduced to 3. Write it in bracket. So after execution from 5 it reduced to 3, whereas P2's remaining time is 6. The minimum is still P1, so it will once again continue. So it will not do any context switch, it will basically continue by one more second. When 0 to 3 happens, so all these three processes are in existence. So P1 has already executed for 3 milliseconds, so its remaining time is basically 2, which is once again minimum. It is 2, 6, 4. So no preemption will happen. P1 further continues over there. Right, okay, in fact even this process is in picture there, but only thing is there is a tie between P1 and P4, so it makes sense for me to go with P1 because I can avoid a context switch over there, so P1 still enjoys that benefit. Let it continue for one more millisecond, that is 4th millisecond. All these things came into picture, so remaining time of P1 has now reduced to 1, and that itself is the minimum, so it once again continues up to one more millisecond, so it basically becomes executes between 0 to 5 itself. No preemption will happen. Then what will happen next that is going to happen is this is already done, so the remaining is these 4, minimum is 2, so P4 will get the processor between 5 to 7 millisecond, and then comes P3, that is between 7 to 11, and then comes minimum is P2 between 11 to 17, and lastly P5 between 17 to 24. So this is exactly same as our non-preemptive one, right? Yeah, it's the same. There is no preemption that has happened in this case, whatever we have taken. So this remains the same. But yeah, I'll take up one more problem in the next class wherein let us make this preemptive one more evident there, and we'll try to do that. Okay, so you can try to solve it again. The waiting time, turnaround time, I think remains the same. This is exactly same Gantt chart, no point in calculating again. I suggest you to try round robin algorithm with say time quantum equal to 2 millisecond. As an homework, you can try to do it. Apply round robin algorithm with time quantum equal to 2 millisecond and try to solve this particular problem. Right? So next class, let's take up one more problem and we'll practice round robin as well as preemptive SRTF before moving on to the further topics. Alright? Okay then, see you in the next class.